Exes and Tea podcast fans. Hey guys, I have another episode for you guys today. Thank you for coming back. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being so supportive. I am so excited, as always, because we have a very special guest with us today. Every special guest that we have, every guest is very, very special. What I'm really excited about this one is that we have somebody who's anonymous, and this person is technically speaking still maybe actively involved in the business. That is why they are anonymous. That is why we will never know who they are. So I'm really excited. So, with that being said, of course, we're going to be talking about Amway. Hey, love to hate it, right? Also, if I talk about any of the lines of affiliation, if we're talking about Amway, myself, my guest included, we will be speaking based on personal opinions and personal experiences, okay? Not trying to get sued. We're not here trying to defame anybody, right? Like, we're just regular people trying to share a story. And honestly, I think that if you're 18 years or older, you're going to do what you're going to do. I can't tell you what to do. I would highly recommend listening to these stories, making a decision with the full scope of information that is there. You're going to do you no matter what. Again, not trying to defame anybody. Would I recommend these organizations? No, but you do you. Okay? Cool. So I have with us today, we are going to call her Sarah. Sarah is not her real name. Every name that we are going to be discussing today has been changed. And honestly, you guys, this is exciting because there's so much new information that I know myself and so many other people that I've connected with have been questioning what the hell is this even like in 2024? So I'm really excited to introduce you guys. We have Sarah. Thank you so much, Sarah, for reaching out and being with us today.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me on your podcast. I am really excited to just tell my story, and hopefully whoever is listening to this, if you're in the business still like myself, I'm awake. If you are having questions or if you're having any doubts, please listen to this and have your own mind and just make a decision for yourself, because I've had the same questions. I was brainwashed and I got out, but I'm still in because they want me to stay. So if you're having questions and doubts, you're not alone. I'm literally still there. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course. And what's funny is when people think like, "Oh my gosh, she's still in. Like, why is she still in?" Well, it's a very complicated process, right? Leaving it can be challenging, but I also think it's great that you have this willingness to share your story. It's very clear that obviously you're going to leave one day, but everybody knows it does look like, it looks different for everybody to leave. But I'm curious, how did you find me? How'd you find this podcast?
I honestly was having some doubts about Amway, and I actually was researching on Reddit, and I saw this story about your podcast, X's and T, and I'm like, oh my God, I want to research this, because I was looking at YouTube as well. And I realized I was looking at all these different people talking about Amway, the history of it. And at the time, I was being doubtful. I'm like, no, Amway can't be this bad. Amway isn't this, because they brainwashed me to believe that Amway is the best. Amway is the greatest. Like, if there's any quitters, if there's anybody that's quitting and they currently are talking bad about it, they are losers. So I was like, this can't be true. Like, oh my God, like, are you sure? So I did my research, and I just kept reading the stories, and I listened to your podcast. And oh my gosh, the first episode I listened to was when you had a whole panel of people actually, and everybody was talking about their stories. And I'm like, wait a minute, this is exactly what's happening to me right now. And I just couldn't believe it. I'm like, are they really that controlling? They're telling people when to have kids, when not to date. I'm like, my upline can't be that bad. So when I heard that podcast, I went to the next board plan, and literally everything that they were saying in the board plan reflected what your podcast said, what these people were saying. I'm like, oh my God, this is happening. So that's how I found your podcast.
That's exciting. I'm so excited to hear that my podcast is on Reddit. Thank you guys so much. Whoever put me on Reddit, you guys are the best. Thank you so much. Because that's funny is you're absolutely right. They would say, well, like anybody who like says anything, we're quitters. We weren't working hard enough, which I'm sure the irony of that is you're learning that we worked our asses off. So a lot of us had multiple jobs. We're like not sleeping. Like it's very the opposite that we were not working. The system is working against us. But they would also say as well, and my upline, the club owner, he would say, why would you trust Sexy Kitten 69 on Reddit? And you see my face. A lot of you know where I live, right? And it's because of the power dynamic. Nobody's gonna actually tell the club owner, hey, you're a piece of shit. It's easier to go on Reddit where you can be like brutally honest. And I have found that Reddit's actually a great source. So no, I'm really excited that you were able to hear that in the panel. Oh my gosh, I love doing that. I need to do more of those. I had two sets of them, and then I had these four girls who were on who all had the same platinum. The funny part is that guy has heard it and he went off, and we're happy to hear it. Fuck that guy. Anyways, so yeah, I think that when you start to question things, the first thing that you really start to read is like other people's stories. When you were going through, obviously listening to my podcast, finding the other things, were you looking more for like factual information, or were the stories of other people really what were speaking to you the most?
Honestly, it's actually a combination of those 2. Because I'm a very skeptical person, I wanna get to the root of why things are the way they are. So when I was hearing people's testimonies about Amway, I'm like, "Okay, maybe" when I was still brainwashed, I'm like, "Maybe they just had a really bad experience. Maybe they just didn't have a really good upline." Because I, at the time, thought my upline was all, was it rainbows and unicorns and all these things. Um, but what I started to really wake me up was comparing other people's stories on YouTube and the history behind how Amway was created by Richard DeVos and all those other kingpins. I compared. And also when my audios on my Wordlight app started to get, audited, I'm like, wait a minute, why are my audios getting audited? So that's another thing that caught my attention. And I started to research about Richard DeVos. And I'm like, okay, he's the creator. So that got me down a rabbit hole of how Emma was even created. That's what started to wake me up. And then the whole cross-learning situation, that's another thing that kind of stacked me on, which is why I started to question everything. So mixture of other people's stories from strangers and then seeing things online, and also my personal experiences with cross-line experience, as well as people I was taking through the process. So it was just a whole whirlwind of facts, opinions, and what I was seeing. So that's what was, brought my attention to this.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that it makes sense, right? So it's usually like a death by a thousand cuts, where it just kind of starts the domino effect, where one thing happens and you just kind of start to learn all of this information. And at any point before you were doing your research, while you were in the business, because you were in for about a year, right?
Yeah, I got signed in February of this year.
Oh, okay. So not even a full year. Again, we love to hear it. We love when people start to wake up so much sooner because you've saved so much of your life. But
Mm.
up until you did your research, had you any idea? Did they tell you, were they honest with you that they were making money off the tools?
Oh, no, they don't say anything about that. In the board plans, they say, "Oh my gosh, I'm driving here, I'm paying for, babysitting, I'm not, gaining anything from here." They even would say in the board plan, like, "Hey, so and so, did you pay me to be here?" And he said, "No, I probably should." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, like they're doing this out of the kindness of their own heart." No. When I finally found out about the tools, I was livid because they didn't say anything about that. In the board plans, they make it seem like we're doing this out of kindness of our own heart. But the more I dug deeper and the more I researched about the history of Amway, they make money from board plans, the audiobooks, communicate, even like when they're doing incentives, I think, because they hang out with their diamonds and emeralds before they even meet with us. It's like, what are they doing before they see all of our, people that made the incentive? It's like, to me, it's just shady. And no, they did not disclose any of that, which made me very, very upset when I found out and I addressed it to them.
Yeah. And honestly, that doesn't surprise me. It is really upsetting because it's like, well, they tell us, right? Like in the board plan, we blow these numbers out of the water, right? We just have to show you this for legal purposes. Like our eagles are making like over $1,000 a month. Our platinums are making six figures. It's like, okay, but how? Because when you really start to look at the numbers, none of it makes sense. And then when you start to learn, oh, okay, Q12 platinums and above, they are starting to get a cut from, they're getting like a commission kind of thing off of the apps, and then yeah, they're getting paid to speak. And I'm sure, like you mentioned, there's probably other things that they're getting paid for as well that we don't know about, but it's like easy to speculate like that's a good possibility. And the funny thing is too is like we're the ones who have to pay for our incentives. I actually just recently learned too that moving up, everybody has to pay for that themselves. They don't pay for it.
Oh, oh my God. That is
Yeah.
ridiculous. I'm sorry, but no. That,
Yep.
wow.
which they always say, get there, you got to get there. Nope, you're the one paying for it. And apparently it's really fucking expensive because
Yeah.
they have them at these like bougie places. I learned this from our good friends, Heroes to Villains, Jenna and Stefan. If you guys are not familiar, they were in the business for 13 years. They are now in the depths of their advocacy. We are very grateful for them. But yeah, I mean, just the information that like you're finding out, like, how does it make you feel?
Honestly, it made me very sad and upset because I just felt very lied to and deceived. I think when I found this out, I sent a Kate to my upline because they tell us to always Kate up, to always ask questions. And when I found this out about the tools, I remember very vividly. I was sitting in my car after I got done with work and I was just dumbfounded. I'm like, wait a minute, you make money from the tools? How much do you make? And aren't we stealing from people? And that's when this whole thing got set off. My upline, Double Eagles, the pioneers, they called me immediately 5 minutes after that, Kate, that I sent, because I was just heartbroken. I was like, why didn't you just tell me this? Why didn't you just tell me that after my year of it being complimentary, I had to pay for the tools. I thought this was all free, you know? I thought the only thing that we had to pay for was our license with Amway, as well as just the functions, because obviously, you have to pay your way and pay for the whole venue and stuff like that, but not the tools. Like I thought that was just given to us because we're IBOs, we're independent business owners. We need to have this stuff, right? So when I learned after having my complimentary, partnership with Amway that I have to pay for these, I'm like, wait a minute. I thought this was what we were already going to be given. So it just made me very betrayed and sad. So when my upline attacked me about it, I'm like, wait a minute, like I'm just asking questions. Why are you getting so defensive of me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, you have to explain to me this complimentary system because that's new information to myself and a lot of other people who have been out for a little bit.
Oh, wow. Okay. So the complimentary, basically, when I first signed up in Amway back in February, they recently gave a chance for any new IBO that signs up. I think it was the beginning of this year. It is fully complimentary. You don't have to pay for your partnership with Amway. You don't have to pay for any of the tools. You don't even have to pay for any of the function tickets, not even the rallies, none of that. Everything is completely free. So when you go to rallies, you don't have to pay. Just show when you first signed up and it's $0. Go to the function, $0. You have to pay for Amway? Nope, $0. Everything was zero. So you can do Amway for a whole year without paying for anything.
Holy shit. They must be desperate for money because when I was in, which of course this was back in 2019, you had, or 20, I got it in 2016, got out in 2019. So back in 2016, we had to pay like a $75 charge to Amway. Plus, we had to buy the starter kit. And then, of course, we had Ditto. And then we had to pay for us and our guests had to pay for the functions.
Yeah.
Plus, we had to pay for our memberships, right? Like Communicate, the Premier membership app, everything. And so that shows the desperation though that they have because they need people to see how good the system is because then next year you'll start paying, which is wild. Holy shit. So a whole quote free year of functions. Wow. So that's enticing, right? It's like, oh my gosh, I get to do this for free. But there was no mention that you're going to have to start paying for these things after your full year mark.
Exactly. There was zero mention of that. It was all about paying for Ditto. So the main thing that they wanted us to do was buy Ditto. That's when you're in business. You have to do 60% VCS. That way you are a legit business owner. That's all that we were really paying. But how broke I was, I couldn't even afford Ditto. So it just goes to show that you're right. I didn't realize that they are desperate to have recruits. And that makes me think, is Amway going under? Is Amway losing, business? Because after me discovering they have to pay for the tools, I was seeing ads on YouTube for Amway products like Artistry and Ditto and all these things that I was like, wait a minute, they tell us that we are the marketers. We cannot post about Amway on our Instagram, all that stuff. But why am I seeing ads on like about Ditto on YouTube? Like, oh, contact your, most, current IBO that is in around your area. It's like, wait a minute, why are you advertising? You told us not to advertise. So
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. That's crazy. I've never, thankfully, that's not my algorithm, obviously. But finding out, Amway commercials, which is really interesting that you say you're not supposed to have that on Instagram. I think it might be a line of sponsorship specific thing because people who are still in under my previous diamonds and my even my platinums, they have the link to their store in their bio as some sort of like their fitness and health and fitness people is what they call themselves, and they have themselves drinking like excess or like the products there.
Mm.
I didn't Wow, okay, that's wild because we were very similar to yourself. We were told back then you just off social media altogether. You're not building your business if you're scrolling through Snapchat or Pokemon Go, which was like brand new at the time.
Yeah.
Wow, okay, that's crazy. And just to hear how much, okay, I have to ask, in the updated time, how much are function tickets once you do have to start paying for them?
So the function tickets currently now, when I had to go, it's $215 every ticket. And that's not including if you're a couple, they encourage you to buy both. So it doesn't matter if you can only buy one or two, you have to buy one per person. And that's not including expenses to drive there, to get food, which by the way, you have to buy in Ditto because they encourage you to buy the excess bars and the excess drinks. To only do that, and the hotel, the deposit for the hotel, the gas to get there, the travel to get there if you live really far away, it's 215 bucks. So it's a lot of money.
Wow.
Yeah.
$215. And that's the same for every function all across the board.
Oh yes, every function is it's a solid 215 bucks.
That's crazy. That does show desperation because I think we talked about this before we started recording. It was only $75 roughly for a dream night ticket. And then it was like 175 at most for like spring leadership, FED, and family reunion. That is insane.
Oh my
So
God.
yes, they're offering these free incentives, right? To free your membership or whatever, but then other prices are significantly higher. How much is Communicate and Premier membership at this point?
Honestly, Mammal was making all the calculations to have all of those apps. It's $139 to have all your apps. So Communicate is like 40 bucks, and then premium membership is like what, 50 to $70 ish. So the way he calculated it was like $140 every single month, actually, every month, not for the year.
Wow.
So
Yes. Okay. That checks out because yes, so prices have gone up because in 2016 they would say, oh, it's only $115 for you to have your quote overhead. That's it. You're not like Walmart who needs like thousands of dollars of overhead. All you need for your tools is $115. Wow. Okay. So up about 30 bucks, depending, like give or take whichever apps. That's crazy. Wow. So here we are, 2024 at the very end. You are now like, oh my God, this is crazy. Let's rewind a little bit and go back to how you even got involved in this in the first place. Like, where were you at? Who got you in? What happened?
So basically, when I met my sponsor, he was actually my roommate. So I was just getting out of a very toxic domestic violent relationship. I was in a relationship with a narcissist. I had no idea he was even a narc because he was mirroring me, which is very funny. That's Amway people do that to you when you first get in the business. They mirror you. Um, and I was just really going through it. So when he moved into the house that I was living in with my landlord, I moved into the other side of the house, and he moved in to where the room that I was in. And I didn't know anything about the business at all. Like he was living there for at least 2 or 3 months, and he just seemed like a very nice guy. He was very upbeat. He told me about his life, and he just seemed very like happy-go-lucky person. I was literally like some nights crying in my closet, just like going through the whole breakup and the whole narcissistic relationship. If anybody listening to this is in a narcissistic relationship, I know your pain. It hurts. And I was going through the end of that. So he shared and dropped the message on me when I was going through the breakup. I was contemplating my job because I had two jobs at the time and I was still broke. And he asked me this question. He's like, "Hey, Sarah, how are you doing?" Because he would hear me crying in my room. And he's like, "How are you doing? Like, tell me, how are you feeling? Like, what's going on in your life? Like, I hear you sometimes." And I'm like, "You know what? I honestly just feel so lost. I I'm working 2 jobs right now. I'm not making it. I'm in a relationship, but I don't know if that's gonna go anywhere because I was gonna marry this guy, and I just feel very lost. And he's like, "What do you wanna do with your life?" Like, if time and money were not an issue, they use that term, if time and money were not an issue, what would you do with your life? And I said, I would want to travel the world. I want to make people laugh. I want to connect with other people. I want to help somebody. I want to help somebody get out of debt. And I was just saying all the right things, not knowing what he was doing. And he was, I would love for you to meet my good friends that are successful. They got around the right people. He was using the lingo that I would use as a YouTuber because I was in YouTube at the time. And he's like, I would really like you to meet my friends because they are very successful. So that's how I started my process. I met the pioneers at a restaurant where I live, in the city where I live, and they were all wearing white. And that's my radar went off. I'm like, oh my God, why are they all wearing the same color? That's kind of weird. But I didn't think anything of it because I was desperate.
Yeah, yeah.
I was desperate to find community because I was just getting out of a very toxic relationship. I had nobody. So the one thing that this guy used was like, "Hey, Sarah, I really want to show you the cash flow quadrants. I want to show you how you can make money on the side. You can still have your job, but make cash on the side through a company." And I kept asking the what. I'm like, "What is it? What do you do? What is it?" And he was swerving on that question left and right, just explaining the cash flow, and you can have business partners. It's not, and he explained the pyramid with the job. And I said, okay, like that makes sense. And I was very naive. I was like, oh, in my head, I'm like, this is kind of weird, but I'm going to listen to this person because he's being very nice. He has a very big smile. He makes me feel included. He makes me feel validated. He's speaking life into me, which I wasn't hearing from my ex-boyfriend. So he was preying on those things. So I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm sold. Like, I want to know more. So his wife was like, you know what, Sarah? Your answers are going to get answered at this house event. They didn't say a board plan. They just said, come with questions in our home. And I said, okay, sounds good. So a couple of days later, I go to this, I didn't know what it was at the time. It's called board plan, but they said, hey, it's like a house event that you're going to meet these very successful entrepreneurs. That's when I met my emeralds, the Goodwills. So I was in the front, this guy was in a suit, he had a red watch, he had, all these tattoos. He said he was a drummer. And he's like, hey, you guys, I got $70,000 out of debt. I'm successful. My wife walked away from her job at 24, and they just looked like a very happy-go-lucky couple. And I was like, oh my God, these are great people. Like, I would love to get to know them. And I just was desperate again for community. So at the very end of the board plan, the meeting, his wife was like, "Oh my gosh, Sarah, nice to meet you," and I was dressed in my like nice outfit. I asked them, I said, "What do you do? Like, please tell me, like, what are these products? I would love to sell them." Because at the time I was modeling, I did modeling for a little bit, and I was advertising for other companies in the modeling industry. And I was also on YouTube. So I'm like, I could totally promote this on my YouTube channel. I could post it on my Instagram. I'm a model. Like, I think the first modeling gig I had when I first got signed up, I had my artistry lipstick that I used in my modeling gig. So that's when I first got signed up. So
Oh, okay.
I was so in, I was sold. So when I met them, they were amazing people. And I'm like, I would love to get launched with you. So that whole process went down, and I got my parents signed up, and that's a whole nother story, but that's how I got involved. So yes.
So you were a person who was already, it sounds like, on your way to success the way that you had planned on being successful. And of course, like you said, they caught you at this very vulnerable time in your life where I mean, of course, and a lot of people who have been in the situation, right? If you've been with a narcissist or anybody who really has a breakup altogether, that's really traumatic. Where do you go from here when you had this plan to be with this person? Absolutely, there's a lot of emotions that come with it. And this person was like, this might be a good opportunity to talk to you about it. And I I think we talked about this before where it's kind of like that double-edged blade, right? Where it's like, I really want to view this person as like, oh my God, you got me into a scam. And then it's like, oh my gosh, they've been brainwashed enough to believe that this is actually going to help me. That's definitely something I feel like I always view whenever I hear about different people and their sponsors. I have to say, I absolutely relate to your story because I was also out of a domestic violence relationship when I got involved. The difference is my sponsor's actually a piece of shit. Fuck that guy. But it's true. People will find you in the most vulnerable moments. And then, of course, everything that they're saying sounds fucking fantastic, especially when they, now that we know, they cater everything that they say to you specifically and to the newest person in the room. And when you were going through this, what we would call the process, right? At what point did you actually finally hear that this was Amway and worldwide? Roughly around how long were you from start to like to finding out, communicating with these people?
Honestly, I didn't really hear the word Amway until I went to the board plan, and my process went really fast. So my sponsor dropped on me, I think it was on a Monday. I went to the meet and greet one in the restaurant the next day on Tuesday. There was a second look meeting at a hotel on that same Thursday night, so that same week. And then I got launched 3 weeks later. So I didn't really hear the word Amway for like maybe 3 days. My process was very quick. So I heard that, yeah. And I was sucked in because my grandfather did Amway and I look up to my grandfather. So
Oh,
that's why I didn't think it was a problem because I'm like, "Oh my God, my grandfather was in Amway. I would love to do this. Like I'm building my legacy for my family because he lived in Hawaii." So it just all the pieces were coming together and I was super excited about it. So yeah, 3 days.
yeah. Wow. Okay. So, this just hit me. It's so crazy how, and I've never questioned this before, right? Think about it. If these are very, very busy entrepreneurs, what are the odds that they would actually have the time carved out? Oh my gosh, we can meet you next day. Not only that, we can get you into a meeting that just happens to already be there on this day.
Mhm.
Oh my God. It really is all, I mean, obviously, we know now that it's all very calculated. Did they
Mhm.
ever pull the whole, I don't know if we can get you a seat into this room kind of a thing?
Honestly, they kept building me up and validating me. So they said, "Hey, you know what, Sarah? Like you seem like a sharp girl. I would love to save you a seat in this room, but you have to make sure that you're committed. Like, are you committed to learning about this business opportunity?" I'm like, "Oh my God, like, yes, I want to know." So in a way, I was kind of selling myself without realizing what I was doing until knowing about how this process works. I was a perfect prospect because I was eating it all up. So it's okay, you know what? We'll save you your seat. Like, you know what? You're a good person, you're a good girl. Like, I would love to have you there. So they didn't really tell me, like, "Oh, I don't know," because I was a woman and I was getting out of a very bad relationship. They probably were preying on, like, "Let's make this girl feel good. Let's make her feel included. Let's make her feel special." And that's what they were doing. They didn't really ever say, "I don't know if we're gonna save you a seat." They were like, "Oh, let's do it. We'll do it for you. We'll pull strings." So, yeah.
Yeah. Hey, that's that you really sold yourself. I love that because it's always really interesting just to hear how they pitch it to people. I just hear commonly like, "I don't know what I can do for you. I don't know," but I love that they're like, you know what, we got you, and I'm sure that felt really good because it's validating. Like, oh no, I'm showing them I'm a good person, and then you get around, and then you've already had this positive notion of Amway, and you had obviously people who are in your corner and supportive. There's probably not very many red flags going off in your head that are large enough to make you question things. And so you're sponsored. Holy crap. 3 weeks later. So now that you're in, you're sponsored. What is the obligations that you now have? Like, what were the PV requirements and roughly around how many meetings and drop messages were you supposed to do?
Okay, so in the very beginning, when they had me sign the contract of like you accountability, you have to be very good at listening to Kate's every single day. You have to read 15 minutes a day of the book roster that we give you. You have to interact on Dreamstream, which is like a social media app for Amway. You have to communicate upline once a day. You have to be core. And I was still learning about that core system when I first got signed up. I was not really sure about that, but I'm like, you know what? I'll do whatever you tell me because I wanted to be successful. So, reading a book 15 minutes a day, listening to Kate's every single day, talking to upline every single day, even reflections. So they want us to send reflections of an audio that we listen to every single day. And the PV requirement, what my Emerald was saying in the board plan was 150 PV was for a single. So when I learned about the points, that was like 3 PV for $1. So it's like, I would say $450, I would say roughly. And he said that was weak sauce. So if you're a couple, they want you to do 300 PV. So singles 150 PV, couple 350 PV, or I'm sorry, 300 PV. And you have to also be dedicated to twice a month board plans. I think for the major functions, it was like every major function 4 times a year. And they want you to be all in, which means sharing your story at least 10 times a day and getting three drops a day. So how they broke it up was with these core runs. If you're on stage 1, share your story with your names list. If you're on stage 2, drop the message once or twice a day. If you're on stage 3, you have to drop the message 3 times a day. And that's how you earn the incentive. So they made you feel like you have to do stage 3 to get around this association. So even if you're on stage 1 and I just got sponsored, I'm like, oh, I want to be around these people. Like I just got out of a relationship. I want friends. So I pushed myself to do stage 3. And that's when I got loved bombed. They said, oh my gosh, Sarah, you're doing such a great job. My Emerald was like blasting me all over their Kate. Everybody in the organization heard about me. Everyone knew who I was. They're like, oh my gosh, I want Sarah on my team because she's amazing, you know? But I didn't know any better. I just wanted to be validated and liked. So I did everything they told me to do. So that's what the requirements were.
So like, God, those core runs. We had the same thing for our incentives as well. So if you guys are new here or are not familiar, core is change or remain employed. There were 10 steps of core, which is literally everything that you mentioned, which is great. You have to have personal use. You have to be willing to drop the message every single day, which is share your story. You have to read your book 15 minutes a day. You have to send your Kate up every single day. You have to have your function tickets locked in or rally tickets or whatever it was. The next thing was available. I'm missing so many. I feel like I've gone through course so many times and I'm like, oh, your audio, you have to listen to an audio a day and you have to STP. Ditto was another one. I'm pretty
Yep.
sure I missed one. All of those, right? So this is all the expectations, and it sounds very similar to every other line of sponsorship. But I think what kind of stuck out to me was this contract of accountability. I have never heard anybody else speak about this. You unlocked a memory because my line of sponsorship used to do that, but they got told that they can't do it anymore. This was way back in 2016. And I have to ask, what the hell is this contract of accountability? Like, on what planet do they think that you legally have this obligation to sign? Hey, I'm going to be accountable. Like, what does this even look like?
So you can actually find it in the BOV. So all the documentation in our app, worldwide app, it shows the process. So when you have someone sign, they have a page 1, 2, and 3, and then stage 2, which is they go over. So it's, oh gosh, you get signed up, you get launched, and you sign this contract of accountability, which means you are telling your sponsor you are going to be accountable to talk to them, do everything they say, staying core. If we're going to be in a business partnership with you, you have to commit to us because we're committing to you. So basically, it's a give or take, it's a transaction. At the meantime, I'm like, oh my God, I would love to partner with you. I will show you I can do this. I'm grateful. The key that they were using is, are you grateful for us in your life? And in order for you to show that you are grateful, you would do all these things for us and for we're doing it for you. So that's what they use, that if you're grateful. That was stage 1. Stage 2 is a budget session. So they go through all of your budget, you write everything down, you do a Zoom call, they try to weave their way in so they can see what part of your income can be towards ditto. So mine was leaking in like going out to eat, being with my friends. I'm a very low maintenance person with my looks. So I just was like, ah, that's $10, whatever. They said, oh my gosh, okay, you can totally buy into ditto. That was stage 2. Stage 3 was like going over the BOV and like ABC, the whole process of like, are you A, are you B, are you C? You know, which stage are you in? So that was like the whole accountability process that they wanted to do with you to see if you're a good business partner and if this partnership is going to work. So that's kind of what I did.
That's so funny. Oh my God. So it sounds like this is kind of I guess if you will, industry wide. Like if it's in the app, like it's very much all of worldwide, which is so funny. I mean, hey, at least they made it through a freaking leaders or management team, because ours they were just typing shit out and letting us sign whatever on the piece of paper, which obviously they're not supposed to fucking do. And they just kind of did whatever the fuck they wanted, and they still are. But
Mm.
that's so interesting. Okay. So you have to be accountable to them. And the ironic part now is learning that there's so much information that is not reciprocated, right? There's a lot of things that you don't know how they're making their money and a lot of how the manipulation tactics are used. Wow. Okay. So, and I think it's really cool that you were in such a short period of time because obviously so much happened. At
Mm.
what point did you finally start to see some red flags, and what were they that made you start to question things?
Honestly, it was in a board pen that we had. It was before family reunion. And oh, I'm sorry, spring leadership. That was my first major function. It was before spring leadership. I think the Goodwills, my emeralds, signed a nurse. And then this other girl in my organization that were signed under the pioneers, the double eagles that are currently double eagles, but they were eagles at the time. We all of us girls were like, oh my gosh, like let's go to this major function together. Let's carpool. Let's share a room. Let's, connect and save seats. So we all got each other's numbers. And it was in front of the emeralds, in front of that the eagles at the time, and they didn't say a word, nothing. And I was new, so I didn't, they probably didn't want to make me feel weird. So I got these girls' numbers. We texted, we said, hey, we're going to go at the function at this time, all these things. We arrived, it was fine. And then I started texting these girls like on the side, like, oh my gosh, how are you doing? All these things. And then it got brought up to me by my emeralds. And they said, hey, like, do you have this girl's number? I said, yeah, like, we're going to go to the function together. And they said, oh, okay. Just make sure that you're not talking to them as much. I said, all right, it's fine. They were very careful with me for whatever reason. And what really caught my attention with cross-lining was when I started to wake up. I had to move it out of my current situation with my sponsor that was my roommate. And this couple, they're super nice. They're in my organization. And they said, oh my gosh, Sarah, like I would love for you to move into our house because we have a room. It was good rent. It was amazing. I'm like, oh my God, I would love to move in with you because we're in the business. We can work together. We can, do things together. It's a great situation. And I told my emeralds who were coaching me at the time, and they said, oh my gosh, like Sarah, you can't move in with them. And I said, why not? They said, oh, that's cross signing. It's against the rules. And that's when they really put the hard boundary on me. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, we're in the same organization. Like, why can't I move in with them? They said, oh, you know what? I'm going to send you Crossline Kate's right now so it can explain to you. And it was Kate's by Pete Hershelman and I think Brad Duncan and someone else. I forgot their name. But those two big kingpins were the ones I listened to at the Kate's. And at the
Yeah.
time, yeah, at the time, my parents were under me. So I signed my parents and I told them about this. And my parents were like super gung ho about Amway and everything. And I told them about this crossline situation. And I'm like, Mom, like, why can't I move in with them? And they're like, okay, send us those Kates. And I forwarded those Kates to my parents. And they're like, this is weird. And I'm like, okay, that's when I started to feel kind of weird because I was okay with the crossline at the time. My parents were the ones that brought up this is odd. And they had a meeting with my emeralds. And that's when my parents started to want to leave. And I'm like, wait a minute, like, why? Like, this is okay. It makes sense to me, but it definitely raises some red flags for me. So that's when I started to feel, isn't this kind of weird?
That's so interesting. And I think that's so funny because I was just telling you before we started recording, or maybe even earlier, I don't remember when, but that they had worldwide houses that like my downline lived in a house with cross-line people who were in our organization. Like they would put people together. So it's really interesting. I'm sure they probably had to stop doing that. Something probably happened. There's probably a lot of cross-lining that was happening. And it's really interesting, right? We're going to talk about the the concept of crosslining. Technically, what we're doing right now is crosslining. I love it. It's just so interesting because, well, why don't they want us to crossline? The excuses that they give, and you can correct me if they use new excuses, but they would say, oh, if such and such person, if Joe down here was an alcoholic and we've been working on him to with him to fix his alcoholism, and then he goes to hang out with you and you don't know about his alcoholism because we're not supposed to pass negative crossline or downline, then you take, you guys go out to lunch together and you get a margarita because maybe you don't have an alcohol problem, and then you're tempting Joe over here to get alcohol, and all of a sudden he's back into his alcoholism.
Honestly, that's actually a very similar thing that they told us about. And I didn't realize this when I heard the Kate that my Emerald sent to me from Pete Hershelman. Same concept that they said. It's like, you know what? Their reasoning was budgeting. So
That
if
too.
say,
Yep.
yep, say that you go out with this person cross line, you're wasting your time when you could be prospecting with this other cross line. You're supposed to go out and network, not connect with this cross line person. So they would say you are not prospecting, you're not spending your time wisely. You should be building your business, and you're spending money out and about with them. If you go to coffee, if you go to lunch, if you go to dinner with your cross line, then in my mind, oh, like I was very naive, but I realized, oh, wait a minute, they're losing that money for themselves. So the upline is losing money because this crossline friendship, they're wasting time not prospecting, not getting contacts, not sharing their story, and they're spending my ditto money that I should be getting from that downline with this crossline, which I put two and two together recently, and it makes me pissed off because that's my money that I earned at my job. I can spend it any way I want, but no, you can't cross line and spend that money and actually enjoy it. So that's what they use is, you know what? Make sure you're only in line with your upline, you're plugged in, don't cross line because you could be wasting that person's time building the business.
Yeah. Oh
Yeah.
my God. Yes, absolutely. All of that. Jesus. Yep. Times really have not changed. And if you guys are out there, if you guys haven't listened, you guys got to go listen to the Anti MLM Kid on TikTok. Go listen to her on Roberta Blevins' Anti MLM podcast as well. She's on there. She's also on here. Hey, go listen to her episodes here. She talks about all of these things, and even her parents started right at the very beginning of time. Basically, they've been in for half a century. They were telling them the same things, right? So it's funny to me that they're still doing this. But also, one thing that I saw just in relevance to this conversation, and when we were talking about cross lining, one thing that I learned as well is, so I crossed once because I worked at a call center that a bunch of worldwide dream builders were working at. Okay. Like everybody was working there. It was a business building job. It was easy to get. Right. And there's this guy, and I think we were talking about how much PV we were required to do. He tells me, oh, yeah, it's like 150 PV. I was so mad. I was like, what do you mean 150? Like, I'm a single mother. I'm having to do 200 PV. That is 600 at the time a month. And that's a conservative number. It could go up to 700 depending on what products you're buying. Right. And it's really interesting because I brought it to my upline, Robert. Robert's a piece of fucking shit. Fuck you. Um, but it's interesting now because he didn't want me to know that. And so a lot of the cross-lining rules is because they don't want us to communicate. They don't want us to know, well, what's actually going on behind closed doors. Because if we start to question with each other, we're going to start to question the system. And as you mentioned, our money's not going to go to them anymore. We're going to wake up and we're going to see things. And when you were in with your parents while they were still in, was there any coaching that like you're no longer their daughter at this point? Like you're not taking advice from them, you're taking advice from us. Like, was that ever a conversation that was had?
Honestly, yeah, because I did open up to them, my upline, about my relationship with my parents. And I love my parents. They're amazing people. I'm sure they're going to listen to this podcast. I love you,
Hello,
mom and
parents.
dad. Yeah, I love you, mom and dad. But, I will be honest, there were moments where they weren't good parents, and that's okay. Every parent tries to figure it out. Like, I'm sure when I become a mom, oh my God, I'm not going to know anything about parenting, and you learn as you go. So I don't knock them for that, but there are moments where I opened up to my upline about my parents, and they would totally shame them. They would say, "Oh my gosh, Sarah, like don't listen to your parents. You know what? Listen to us. we have financial success. They don't. That's why they're in this business. That's why they're signed up, because they don't have financial success. And I was starting to get financial advice from my upline, and my dad started to get upset because there was an instant where, my parents were going through a financial hardship because when I was in a relationship with my ex, they had to help me so much because my ex told me not to get a job, to be dependent on him. So they had to like help me through that process. So my upline was thinking, okay, parents aren't rich. There's a reason why she's in this business. How can we help her and get her away from her parents? And I think they use that tactic to say, you know what? Don't talk to them. Don't talk to your family. And I am so close to my family. I told them everything that my upline said. And I said, "Hey, like this is what they said." That's when my parents got upset at my upline, saying, "Oh my God, they don't understand the full story of our family. They don't understand the full understanding of what Sarah went through with this relationship." So that's when they started to pull away from the business, because I told them everything that my upline was saying because I'm just close to my family. I don't know any better. And I would tell my family everything. And that's when the rift started, was they wanted me to listen to their financial advice and not my parents' advice. So
It's funny that you say that, right? That's that we have a financial vested interest in you. They don't. But the ironic part is like, oh, well, that's why they're getting in the business because they're not wealthy. Well, why the fuck are you here? It's funny because I guarantee now with everything that we know, I'm almost positive that from double equals to platinums, they're not wealthy. They are not, they're maybe barely breaking even at platinum, depending if they have reached Q12 and how long they've been Q12 and making money off the tools, right? And I think we did some math a little bit to think, okay, how long does it take you to get to a platinum ship? And let's say you are making X amount off, the tools, and how much are you really like up in profit, right? And it's not very much. It would take a long time to actually start to see yourself in the green if you're actually tracking your finances, which oddly enough, they tell us to do when we're budgeting, but then like we don't do it anymore after that. Cause then it's like we only are supposed to track what we're spending, but never what we're bringing in outside of our job. Like, oh, I didn't bring shit in when I was with Amway. But of course, we're not supposed to know that. So
mhm.
your parents leave. Good for them. Excited that you were actually able to keep your relationship with them, even though they tried to build this wedge and you were there. So
Mhm.
once your parents started to leave, was there still part of you trying to hold on to hope that this was the business and maybe your parents just had a different experience?
Yes. So in my past, I would always pull away from my parents because I have a very, interesting relationship with them. So when they left, I was like, you know what? I'm going to build this business on my own. My emerald told me, you know what, Sarah, like this is the time that I can see that you're a champion, because even though your parents left, this is the real um defining factor if you're going to build the business now. And you know what? I think he told me my first partner that I signed was my brother. My brother left. And look at me now, I'm an emerald, you know? It takes seeing your family leaving you and abandoning you to still build the business. So I use that as fuel, because that's happened to me my whole existence. Like I felt abandoned by some family members in my past, and I use that as fuel, like, oh, they've always done that. So I'm going to use this fuel to build the business now. And this is my new family, my new chosen family. So they use that to kind of plant a seed. It's like, this is your purpose, to build the business because your parents left. And you're going to prove to them that you can build it without them. And I think I vented to my platinums. Um, they were saying how my parents were in Amway twice. They were in Amway when my grandfather was in, and they hated the functions. They were like teenagers. And then they came in a second time to see if it changed, and it has. My dad was in it when Bill Britt was still there. Um, and my dad actually got saved at a Bill Britt function, which is kind of funny. But my platinum was saying to me, you know what? Your parents are failures twice because they left two times. So, you know what, Sarah, you're going to be better than them. You're going to prove to them wrong. You're going to make a lot of money, and you're going to prove them that their decision was wrong because they're failures two times. And I'm like, at the time I was eating it up. I'm like, you're right. Like they've always abandoned me. They've always, not believed in me. So I'm going to do this for them, and to prove them I can go diamond. My mom was encouraging, you know what, Sarah, like you can do whatever you want. Like I know that you can do this because you have completed, I have my degree. You've were in sports, you were very dedicated, you can do this. But I don't want to do something that's going to be a waste of my time because whenever I got my degree, whenever I got my, all these things for my professional life, there was a goal and I reached it because it was attainable. But with this business, you have an illusion. It's a goal you can obtain, but it's very hard to sustain. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it's not sustainable. But I think it does take time, of course, to realize that. And I like that your parents were supportive of you regardless of what your upline was saying to you. I love that. And it shows that your parents they knew what was going on, but that they also had a lot of support for you. And I very similar have a very tumultuous relation or had a very tumultuous relationship with my parents. Mine's also very complicated. My dad and I are very close now. But it is interesting to see the wedge that they try to divide families. It sucks. And that's of course now that we know, if you guys are not familiar with Stephen Hassan and his bite model, there's so much to it. I highly recommend going and looking to it. It's freedomofmind.com. Dr. Stephen Hassan is an incredible guy. But the bite model, it goes over so many different aspects of like behavior control, information control, thought control, and emotional control. And worldwide, and all of these different high level or high control groups, they do all of the things on this list. I mean, sure, there's a few things like we're not out murdering people that we know of. Okay. I don't know. But there's definitely a lot of negative things that are happening. As you guys know, these stories take a long time. Now, every story is different, but this one, because it's still, I think, so new, we absolutely are going to need a part two from Sarah. I think with how much she has to share left, we're going to need a whole nother episode here. So I do have to ask, what are some final words that you have with everything that you have shared thus far for our listeners?
Honestly, I will say is like if you think it's too good to be true, if anybody approaches you in Target, Walmart, Best Buy, stay far away from those people because they will prey on your innocence, your gullibility. They will also prey on if you're going through a bad relationship or you don't like your job, because that's what they did to me. If you like your job and you're super gung ho about it and you're defensive about it, like they're not going to bother you. But you have to carry yourself with confidence because they can't deceive you. They're really good at deceiving people. And the board plan that I had, they totally tailored that whole board plan to what I told my sponsor. So I would say to these people listening, just be aware and find out who you are as a person by yourself, because they will try to tell you who you are. They will take your autonomy away. So, to keep these people away from you, if you're afraid of like, oh my gosh, I don't want to be in this cult either, know who you are as a person and be confident in yourself so they can't persuade you.
That was amazing. Well, I am so grateful that we have had the opportunity, and we'll continue to hear from you, Sarah. You guys, if you guys want to be like Sarah and you guys want to be on here, you guys can share about an Amway story, MLM story. It doesn't even have to be MLM related. You guys, we talk about a lot of different traumatic stories here. You guys can DM me on Instagram at xsnt.podcast, and you can email me at dani@xsntpodcast.com. You guys can catch me on Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, and everywhere else podcasts are heard. Thank you again so much, Sarah, and we'll catch you guys in the next episode.